What if everything you thought you knew about the Bible was incomplete? What if the scriptures we read today are just the remnants of a larger, more complex story, one that was deliberately rewritten? The Bible speaks of one God, but ancient texts suggest otherwise. Hidden within its verses are traces of deities that once stood beside Yahweh, gods who were worshipped, revered, and later erased. But why? Who were these forgotten gods, and what secrets were buried with them? Throughout history, knowledge has been controlled, altered, and even erased. Powerful rulers and religious leaders shaped the way we understand faith, deciding which gods would be remembered and which would be forgotten. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, were once worshipped by thousands, their names spoken in prayers that have long since been silenced. But what if they never truly disappeared? What if their influence still lingers in ways we've never noticed? The Bible we know today is the result of centuries of revision, its original stories modified to fit a new religious order. Gods who once ruled the heavens alongside Yahweh were either absorbed into his identity, demonized as false idols, or removed entirely. But traces remain, hidden in ancient inscriptions, buried in forgotten texts, and scattered throughout history, waiting to be uncovered. Imagine a world where monotheism never took hold, where Yahweh still shared his throne with a divine council, where Asherah stood as his consort, and where Baal was not a demon, but a god of storms and fertility. How different would our spiritual beliefs be today? How much of what we consider sacred truth is actually the result of centuries of human intervention? The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, challenge everything we think we know about religion. Stay with me, because we are about to uncover the greatest cover-up in religious history. The truth is out there, hidden in plain sight, and once you see it, there's no going back. The mystery of forgotten gods. Imagine living in a world where monotheism was not the absolute truth but merely a choice made by those in power. Today, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam stand firm in the belief of one God, an omnipotent being who reigns alone. But what if history had taken a different turn? What if the Bible itself held whispers of forgotten gods, erased from Scripture to fit a new narrative? The truth is, ancient texts contain traces of a time when Yahweh was not alone, when the divine realm was filled with other deities, now lost to time. Scholars have long debated the remnants of polytheism hidden within biblical scripture. The earliest Israelites were not strict monotheists. Their beliefs evolved, shifting through layers of cultural and religious transformation. The Bible, as we know it, was not written in one sitting. It was edited, redacted, and shaped by generations of scribes with a clear agenda. And in that process, some gods were pushed into obscurity, their names erased, their roles diminished. But why? Who were these forgotten deities, and what did they represent? The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, is not just a theory, it's a reality buried within ancient texts. In early biblical writings, multiple gods are subtly acknowledged, sometimes even worshipped alongside Yahweh. Over time, however, these deities vanished from mainstream religious doctrine. The question is, were they truly erased, or did they survive in ways we failed to recognize? Perhaps their influence lingers in traditions we don't even question today. One of the strongest pieces of evidence lies in the remnants of polytheistic expressions scattered throughout the Old Testament. Verses referencing the sons of God and Yahweh's divine council suggest a time when the heavens were not ruled by one God, but by many. The transition from this divine plurality to absolute monotheism was not accidental, it was deliberate. And understanding this shift is key to unlocking one of history's greatest religious transformations. The Bible is a book of mysteries, contradictions, and hidden truths. What we see today is the result of centuries of theological refinement, where inconvenient elements were removed, and dominant narratives were enforced. The gods that once stood alongside Yahweh may have been erased from Scripture, but they were never truly forgotten. Traces of their existence remain, waiting to be rediscovered by those willing to look beyond the official story. So, what happens when we uncover these lost deities? What does it mean for our understanding of religion, history, and belief itself? If these gods were real, if their worship once rivaled that of Yahweh, then we must ask ourselves, how much of what we know about faith is truly divine, and how much is simply the result of human intervention? Yahweh's divine council, the gods among him. Long before monotheism took its final form, Yahweh was not seen as the sole divine being. The Hebrew Bible itself hints at a celestial hierarchy, a pantheon of divine entities surrounding him. In Psalm 82, Yahweh stands among the divine council, judging other gods. Deuteronomy 32:8-9 reveals an even more startling claim, that Yahweh was assigned to Israel, just as other nations were given their own gods. This isn't the language of strict monotheism, it's the language of a world where multiple deities coexisted. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, is a reality that Scripture itself struggles to conceal. Ancient Israelite religion wasn't always what we recognize today. Early Israelites were henotheists, worshipping Yahweh as their primary god but acknowledging the existence of others. This belief system was common across the ancient Near East, where gods ruled over specific territories, much like kings and emperors on earth. The idea of a single universal God was a later development, shaped by centuries of theological and political changes. If Yahweh once stood among many, what led to his ascension as the one true God? Biblical texts don't just hint at other gods, they outright mention them. The term Elohim, often translated simply as God, is actually a plural word. In some contexts, it refers to Yahweh alone, but in others, it speaks of a council of divine beings. This is where the erasure begins, where the gods of old are transformed into mere angels or dismissed altogether. But traces of their presence remain, buried within scripture like fossils of a forgotten age. The shift from a divine council to a singular deity was not merely a religious transformation, it was a political one. In the ancient world, rulers sought legitimacy through divine authority. A singular, all-powerful God reinforced the idea of centralized power, aligning religion with monarchy. If Yahweh ruled alone in the heavens, then his earthly representatives, kings and priests, could claim absolute authority as well. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, were not just lost to faith, they were casualties of control. Even today, echoes of the divine council persist in unexpected places. The idea of a heavenly court, of spiritual forces beyond human understanding, is not exclusive to Judaism. Christianity and Islam retained elements of this celestial hierarchy, though in altered forms. Angels, demons, and saints may be modern stand-ins for what were once fully recognized deities. If so, then monotheism is not as pure as it seems. It is simply a refined version of an older, more complex belief system. So, what happened to these forgotten gods? How did they fade into obscurity while Yahweh became the singular divine authority? To uncover the answer, we must dive deeper into the names and stories of the deities who once shared the stage with him. Gods whose worship shaped history, yet whose existence was deliberately erased. The forgotten gods of the Bible. El, the supreme God before Yahweh? Before Yahweh became the central figure of the Israelite faith, another god held the highest place in the heavens, El. Known as the chief deity of the Canaanite pantheon, El was the father of gods, the creator of the universe, and the one whom many ancient Semitic peoples worshipped. The earliest biblical text suggests that Yahweh may not have originally been synonymous with El, but rather a separate deity who was later merged with him. In fact, some passages still refer to Yahweh as El Shaddai, linking him to the older supreme god. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, may not have disappeared completely, they were simply rewritten. The idea of Yahweh evolving from El is not just speculation, it is supported by linguistic and archaeological evidence. Ancient inscriptions found in Ugarit, a Canaanite city, describe El as a wise and benevolent ruler of the gods, eerily similar to how Yahweh is later portrayed. But the shift from El to Yahweh was not just about theology, it was about identity. The Israelites, emerging as a distinct people, needed a God who was uniquely theirs. Over time, Yahweh absorbed the attributes of El, effectively replacing him while maintaining continuity in belief. Yet, remnants of El's original role still linger in the Bible. Genesis 1:26 speaks of God saying, "Let us make man in our image," implying the presence of other divine beings. Some argue this refers to angels, but an older interpretation suggests this is a remnant of the polytheistic roots that Judaism once had. Even names in Hebrew culture, like Israel, which means struggles with El, preserve traces of El's dominance. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, are not entirely lost, they survive in the very language we use to describe divinity. If El was once the highest god, why was his name slowly erased? The answer lies in religious consolidation. As Yahweh's worship grew, the need for a singular, unchallenged deity became crucial. This wasn't just a spiritual shift, it was a political one. A god who stood alone provided a clearer structure for religious authority, reinforcing the growing power of priestly elites. The old names and figures of the divine world were not simply forgotten, they were systematically removed to shape the faith into what we know today. Even today, El's influence remains hidden in plain sight. Words like Elohim, often translated as God, and biblical phrases referencing the Most High still echo his ancient presence. But few question why these names exist, or what they truly meant before Yahweh absorbed them. What if history had taken a different path? Would the world today worship El instead of Yahweh? Or were they always meant to become one and the same? But El is only the beginning. The Bible speaks of another figure, one whose existence was not only erased but deliberately suppressed. A goddess, a divine consort, a being who once stood beside Yahweh, worshipped alongside him before vanishing from the pages of history. Who was she? And why was she erased? Asherah, the lost wife of God? In the shadows of biblical history lies a forgotten goddess, Asherah, once worshipped alongside Yahweh. Her name and presence were deliberately erased as monotheism took hold. Archaeological discoveries, including ancient inscriptions and artifacts, reveal that early Israelites revered Asherah as Yahweh's divine consort. Inscriptions found at En Tillet I-Rud, an archaeological site in the Sinai Peninsula, even contain the phrase Yahweh and his Asherah, suggesting that Yahweh was not always worshipped alone. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, include more than just forgotten gods. Some were goddesses, their influence silenced by those who sought a male-dominated faith. The Bible itself contains traces of Asherah, though often in a negative light. She is frequently associated with sacred trees and wooden poles, symbols of fertility and divine presence, which later biblical authors condemned. The Book of Kings describes how her altars were destroyed, her images burned, and her name wiped from memory. But why? Why was Asherah's worship so threatening? The answer lies in the shift toward a strictly patriarchal religious system, where male dominance extended not just to society, but to the heavens as well. A powerful goddess standing beside Yahweh challenged this new order. Yet, her worship was not limited to Israel. Asherah was venerated throughout the ancient Near East, known by various names, Astarte, Anat, and Ishtar among them. She represented fertility, motherhood, and divine wisdom, concepts that later traditions would struggle to suppress. The echoes of Asherah's presence remain in religious texts and practices, from the Virgin Mary in Christianity to the Shekinah in Jewish mysticism, both embodying aspects of the divine feminine. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, may be hidden, but they are never truly gone. Some scholars argue that the removal of Asherah was not just about religion but about control. A male-dominated priesthood could not afford a divine feminine counterpart who shared power with Yahweh. Monotheism, as it developed, required an all-powerful, singular God, one without a wife, a partner, or competition. This erasure was not just theological, it was political, reinforcing the authority of those who dictated religious law. The suppression of Asherah mirrors the suppression of powerful female figures throughout history, a pattern seen in countless civilizations. But what if Asherah had not been erased? What if her worship had continued alongside Yahweh's? Would modern religions embrace a divine feminine as equally as they do a divine masculine? The possibility is fascinating, and it raises an uncomfortable question. How much of what we believe today was shaped by deliberate suppression? How different would the world's faiths be if Asherah still stood beside Yahweh, worshipped as she once was? Asherah's story is just one example of how biblical history has been rewritten. But there were others, powerful gods who were once revered but later transformed into villains. Among them, one name stands out, a deity who went from being a respected storm god to Yahweh's greatest rival. His name? Baal. And his story is one of the most dramatic erasures in religious history. Baal, the rival god demonized. Once, Baal was a god of storms, fertility, and prosperity, a powerful deity worshipped across the ancient Near East. To the Canaanites, he was a bringer of life, controlling the rains that sustained their crops. His name, meaning Lord or Master, commanded reverence. Yet, in the Bible, Baal is portrayed as a false god, an enemy of Yahweh, and a symbol of idolatry. How did this respected deity become the villain of Israelite faith? The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, were not always forgotten. Some were deliberately demonized, their roles twisted to serve a new narrative. The Israelites did not always reject Baal. In fact, early evidence suggests that many of them worshipped both Yahweh and Baal, seeing no contradiction between the two. Even biblical texts confirm this, with prophets like Elijah condemning Israelites for wavering between two opinions, 1 Kings 18:21. The reality is that Baal's worship was deeply rooted in the region's culture, and Yahweh had to compete for dominance. But as Israel's religious leaders sought to establish a strict monotheistic faith, Baal became the ultimate rival, one who had to be cast down, not just as a competing god, but as the very embodiment of evil. One of the most striking examples of Baal's demonization is the story of the prophet Elijah on Mount Carmel. In a dramatic confrontation, Elijah challenges the prophets of Baal, calling upon Yahweh to send fire from the heavens. When Yahweh's fire consumes the offering while Baal remains silent, the outcome is clear. Baal is powerless, and Yahweh is supreme. But was this truly a divine victory, or was it a carefully crafted legend designed to delegitimize Baal's worship? The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, were often victims of religious propaganda, rewritten as weak or malevolent beings. Interestingly, Baal's demonization didn't stop with the Old Testament. His name continued to be associated with evil long after his temples had fallen. In later Christian and occult traditions, Baal was transformed into Beelzebub, a prince of demons in hell. This shift was not accidental. It was part of a broader strategy to not only erase competing gods, but to turn them into symbols of corruption and sin. The name that once meant Lord became synonymous with darkness. How many other ancient gods met the same fate, their legacies buried under layers of religious revision? But Baal was not the only god whose image was distorted. Another deity, one far more mysterious, far more feared, was cast as the ultimate villain of the Old Testament. This god was accused of demanding child sacrifice, of corrupting the Israelites, and of embodying everything Yahweh opposed. But was he truly worshipped as described, or was he another victim of historical revision? His name was Moloch, and his story is one of the most chilling erasures of all. Moloch, the forbidden god of sacrifice. Few names in the Bible evoke as much horror as Moloch. Described as a monstrous deity who demanded child sacrifice, he is condemned in some of the strongest terms found in Scripture. The book of Leviticus warns that anyone who offers their offspring to Moloch shall surely be put to death. Leviticus 22:5. The god's name became synonymous with cruelty, an abomination that had to be erased from Israelite worship. But was Moloch truly a bloodthirsty god, or was he another victim of religious rewriting? The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, were not always evil. Sometimes, their stories were shaped to justify their destruction. The worship of Moloch is one of the most debated topics in biblical archaeology. Some scholars believe he was not a separate god at all, but a title or representation of another deity, possibly Baal or even Yahweh himself in an older, more brutal form. Ancient texts suggest that child sacrifice was practiced by various cultures in the Near East, but whether it was truly a religious requirement or a rare, extreme ritual is unclear. Could it be that Moloch was demonized as a way to distance Yahweh from earlier traditions that no longer aligned with evolving moral values? What's even more intriguing is how later civilizations continued to use the image of Moloch as a tool of fear. Early Christians accused their enemies of worshipping Moloch, just as medieval witch hunters accused suspected witches of sacrificing children. Even today, conspiracy theories invoke his name, associating him with hidden cults and secret rituals. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, often resurface in unexpected ways, their stories manipulated to serve new agendas. Interestingly, the idea of a god demanding extreme sacrifice was not unique to Moloch. In the Bible, Yahweh himself commands Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, a command only reversed at the last moment. Could this be a remnant of an earlier time when such practices were seen as a legitimate form of devotion? Did Yahweh's transformation into a merciful God require the vilification of older deities like Moloch, who represented traditions that needed to be abandoned? The answers are buried in the past, but the implications are undeniable. Moloch's story is a reminder that history is written by the victors. Gods who once held power, who were worshipped with devotion, were later recast as demons or forbidden figures. But why was it so necessary to erase them? What was at stake in the shift from a world of many gods to a world where Yahweh alone reigned? The answer lies in the next chapter of our journey, the political and religious forces that made monotheism inevitable, and the deliberate rewriting of sacred texts to remove all traces of the gods who came before. Why were these gods erased? The transition from polytheism to monotheism was not an accident. It was a calculated shift driven by political and religious motives. In the earliest days of Israelite faith, Yahweh was one of many gods, worshipped alongside deities like El, Baal, and Asherah. But as Israel sought to establish itself as a distinct nation, a singular God became essential for unity. Monotheism wasn't just about faith, it was about control. A single God meant a single religious authority, a system that strengthened priestly power and national identity. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, were not forgotten by chance. They were deliberately removed to shape a new religious order. One of the most critical moments in this transformation was the editing of biblical texts. Early scriptures contained traces of a polytheistic past, references to Yahweh's divine counsel, and mentions of other gods. But over centuries, scribes carefully reworked these passages, altering language and reinterpreting meanings. For example, in Deuteronomy 32:8-9, older versions suggest that the Most High, El, divided the nations among his divine sons, with Yahweh receiving Israel. Later versions changed this to fit a monotheistic framework, erasing the idea of other gods having authority over different nations. This was no small change. It was the rewriting of divine history. Another key figure in the erasure of rival gods was King Josiah. In the 7th century BCE, he launched religious reforms that reshaped Judaism, centralizing worship in Jerusalem and purging competing deities. The destruction of Asherah's altars, the burning of Baal's temples, and the suppression of older religious traditions all served a purpose: to establish Yahweh as the one true God. These reforms were not just spiritual, They were political maneuvers designed to strengthen royal power and eliminate religious diversity that could challenge the monarchy. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, did not disappear quietly. Their followers were actively suppressed. Beyond Israel, this shift had far-reaching consequences. Monotheism spread, influencing Christianity and Islam, shaping the religious landscape of the world. But had history taken a different path? Had these gods not been erased, our spiritual traditions might look entirely different today. Perhaps we would still see Yahweh among a pantheon, sharing power with other divine beings. Perhaps the concept of a divine feminine would have remained central, rather than being pushed into the margins. The erasure of these gods was not just about faith, it was about shaping civilization itself. Yet, even though these gods were erased from mainstream worship, their echoes remain. They appear in myths, in hidden symbols, in the remnants of rituals long forgotten. What if their stories were never truly lost? What if, in some form, they still exist, influencing beliefs in ways we fail to recognize? And if that's true, what does it mean for everything we think we know about history and religion? But what if these gods were not just myths? What if their influence extended far beyond ancient Israel, shaping civilizations and belief systems across the world? Could they have inspired later religious traditions? If so, the past is far more connected to the present than we ever imagined. Could these gods have been more than just myths? The ancient world was deeply interconnected, with religious beliefs spreading across cultures, adapting and evolving over time. The gods erased from the Bible didn't simply vanish, they left traces in the myths and traditions of civilizations that came after. Could El, Asherah, Baal, and Moloch have been more than just forgotten deities? Could their influence still be found in the religions we know today? The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, may not have disappeared at all. They may have transformed, hidden in plain sight. Consider the idea of a divine council. The Bible speaks of Yahweh ruling among other gods before monotheism took over. But this concept didn't disappear, it evolved. In Christianity, heaven is depicted as a celestial realm filled with angels, saints, and archangels, all serving a supreme deity. In Hinduism, multiple deities coexist, each governing different aspects of existence. Even in Islam, the idea of divine messengers and spiritual beings remains. Is it possible that the old gods never truly died but were instead rebranded to fit new theological structures? Asherah's disappearance is another mystery. If she was once Yahweh's consort, why does her presence seem to linger in later traditions? Some scholars argue that her attributes were absorbed into figures like the Virgin Mary, who became the feminine face of divinity in Christianity. Others see parallels between Asherah and Sophia, the personification of divine wisdom in Jewish and Gnostic traditions. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, may still be influencing modern spirituality in ways we barely recognize. Even Baal, once demonized in the Bible, may have lived on in unexpected ways. His role as a storm god is strikingly similar to Zeus in Greek mythology and Thor in Norse traditions, both powerful deities associated with lightning and thunder. Could these figures be distant echoes of the same divine archetype, reshaped by different cultures over time? And if so, how many other forgotten gods have simply taken new forms, hiding beneath the surface of modern faiths? If history had unfolded differently, the world's religions might look completely different today. What if Israel had remained henotheistic, worshipping Yahweh as their main god but still acknowledging others? What if King Josiah's reforms had never happened? Would people today pray to a pantheon rather than a singular deity? The past is filled with what-ifs, and every lost god represents a path not taken, an alternate history of faith that was erased by the winners who wrote the scriptures. But the biggest question remains: if these gods were erased, what else was hidden? How much of what we accept as religious truth is actually the result of deliberate editing and suppression? And most importantly, what other secrets still lie buried in the ancient texts, waiting to be uncovered? The hidden truth of the Bible. The Bible, as we know it today, is not just a religious text, it is a product of centuries of editing, reinterpretation, and erasure. What was once a world filled with divine beings was slowly rewritten into a strict monotheistic narrative, removing or demonizing gods that no longer fit the story. But their presence is still there, buried beneath the surface, waiting for those willing to uncover the truth. The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, may not be as lost as we've been led to believe. History is filled with examples of knowledge being controlled by those in power. The removal of certain gods from religious texts was not just about spirituality, it was about consolidating authority. A single, all-powerful deity meant a single religious order, a single interpretation of divine law, and ultimately, a system that could be used to control societies. But the past is never truly erased. If we look closely, we can still see the fingerprints of the old gods in modern faith, mythology, and even cultural traditions. Even today, the echoes of these forgotten deities persist in unexpected places. Symbols of Asherah appear in ancient artifacts, linguistic traces of El survive in biblical names, and the demonized image of Baal continues to influence popular culture. What if the gods never truly vanished? What if their stories live on, reshaped and retold in different forms, still influencing the way people think about the divine? The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, might not be gone. They might just be hidden in plain sight. But this discovery leads to even bigger questions. If gods could be erased, rewritten and transformed, what else has been altered in religious history? How many other truths remain buried beneath centuries of revision? And if the gods of the past were real in the minds of those who worship them, what does that say about the spiritual beliefs we hold today? The more we uncover, the more we realize that history is not as straightforward as we once believed. The Bible is full of mysteries, contradictions, and secrets waiting to be explored. What other revelations lie hidden within its pages? What lost knowledge has yet to be rediscovered? And most importantly, what if the history of religion is far more complex than we've ever imagined? If these questions intrigue you, if you want to keep diving deeper into the forgotten truths of ancient faiths, then there's only one thing left to do. Now, let's take a step further. If you think this was shocking, wait until you hear what else has been erased from history. Subscribe to Ancient Chronicles and make sure you don't miss a single discovery. Because the truth is out there, you just have to be willing to find it. Conclusion. History is not just written, it is rewritten. The gods that once stood beside Yahweh were not simply forgotten. They were erased, transformed, or demonized to fit a new religious order. But now that you know the truth, the question remains, what else has been hidden from us? How many other stories, beliefs, and divine figures have been lost to time, buried beneath layers of revision and suppression? The hidden gods of the Bible, deities erased from history, may be gone from Scripture, but their influence still lingers, waiting to be rediscovered. If these gods were so important in the past, why were they erased? Was it simply a shift in belief, or was it something more? A deliberate attempt to control history and shape the way we understand the divine? And if history was altered once, who's to say it hasn't been altered again? What if there are even more truths, hidden in ancient texts, waiting to be uncovered? Now, ask yourself, how much of what you believe is based on truth, and how much is based on what you were told to believe? If the Bible itself was edited and rewritten over centuries, what else has been changed? What secrets are still buried, waiting for those who dare to ask the right questions? The past is far more mysterious than we've been led to believe, and the answers are out there, you just have to be willing to look. So, are you ready to dive deeper into the lost history of ancient religions? If you're fascinated by hidden knowledge, forgotten gods, and suppressed truths, then this is just the beginning. Subscribe to Ancient Chronicles, turn on notifications, and join us as we continue to uncover the secrets that history tried to erase. Because once you start seeing the truth, you'll never look at history the same way again.